The night sky over Kandahar province burned. September 15, 2018. Tracer fire drew orange lines through darkness, while artillery thunder rolled across the desert like the voice of an angry god. The kind of night where seconds measured the distance between living and dying, and one voice could mean the difference between 47 Americans coming home or 47 flag-draped coffins. Inside a tactical operations center 20 miles from the chaos, Chief Warrant Officer Kate Ashford sat before a constellation of glowing screens. Blue-white light painted her face in stark angles. No emotion visible, just absolute focus. The weight of 47 lives condensed into radio frequencies and drone camera feeds, and the next words out of her mouth. Static crackled. Then a voice tight with fear and adrenaline cut through. Ghost 6, this is Viper 6 actual. We are in heavy contact. 200 plus enemy fighters. We've got wounded. We're pinned in a 3-story compound, and if we don't get air support in the next 5 minutes, we're not walking out of here. Cade's fingers moved across keyboards without hesitation. 3 drone feeds, 2 radio nets, satellite overlay, Apache gunships inbound. Her mind assembled the tactical picture with the speed of long practice and the precision of someone who understood that perfection was the minimum acceptable standard when American lives hung in the balance. Her voice, when it came, was bedrock steady. Viper 6, this is Ghost 6 actual. I have eyes on your position. 12 enemy fighting positions marked on thermal. Apache birds inbound 4 minutes. I need you to hold that compound. Can you hold? Gunfire crackled through the radio, a pause that felt like eternity. Then we'll hold Ghost 6. We don't have a choice. You have a choice. You can trust me. Cade's voice dropped to something almost gentle. I'm going to get every single one of you home tonight. That's not hope. That's a promise. What followed was 6 hours that would be studied in classified after-action reports for years to come. Cade's voice never wavered, never rose in panic, never broke. She talked 2 SEAL teams and a Ranger platoon through a meat grinder, calling strikes that landed within 75 meters of American positions, coordinating medevac helicopters into landing zones hot enough to melt paint, directing AC-130 gunship runs that turned the Taliban ambush into a killing field lit by 105mm cannon fire. When it ended, when the last American lifted out of that compound and silence finally settled over the radio nets, the operations center erupted in cheers. 47 Americans, 0 friendly casualties, 52 enemy dead. Cade removed her headset. Her hands trembled, just slightly, just enough to betray the human cost of 6 hours running on pure adrenaline and the knowledge that one mistake meant death. The man beside her stared at her like he'd witnessed something impossible. Warrant Officer Marcus Kane, 31 years old, partner, mentor, friend. His face showed pride and respect and something deeper he couldn't quite name. You did it, he said quietly. Cade, what you just did shouldn't have been possible. She met his eyes, saw everything reflected there. The mission they'd accomplished, the lives they'd saved, the bond forged through 18 months of operating in hell together. We did it. Your drone work kept them alive long enough for the cavalry to arrive. Marcus smiled, started to reply. The world exploded. The mortar round hit with the force of judgment itself. Ceiling tiles and rebar and concrete came down like the sky was collapsing. Kate felt herself thrown sideways. Her head cracked against something hard, air driven from her lungs, ears ringing with a sound like the end of everything. When her vision cleared, Marcus was pinned beneath a fallen support beam, blood spreading across the floor in a pool that grew too fast. Much too fast. His eyes found hers. Even through the pain, even through the shock of mortal injury, he managed to speak. Finish it, Ghost. That's an order. The screen dissolved to black. A narrator's voice, measured and grave, cut through the darkness like a blade. They called her Ghosts, the voice that saved more American lives in one night than most soldiers save in entire careers. Then she vanished from all military records. For 7 years, no one knew where she went, until one general's arrogance exposed a truth that would change everything. Wow. Fort Carson, Colorado, present day, 7 years later. Morning arrived at the sprawling military installation the way it always did. Distant cadence calls, diesel exhaust from the motor pool. That particular quality of light unique to high altitude in the Rocky Mountain West, making everything look cleaner and sharper and more honest than it deserved to look. Specialist Kate Ashford crossed the parking lot towards Signal Battalion headquarters with a tablet in one hand and coffee in the other. 27 years old now, though most would guess younger. Small frame, 5'4". The kind of person who could disappear in a crowd of three. Her uniform was immaculate. Not the kind of perfect that drew attention, but the kind that passed inspection without warranting a second glance. Clean boots, pressed ACUs, hair in a regulation bun positioned exactly where the manual specified. No deployment patches, no unit citations, no Ranger tab or airborne wings or any of the badges marking a soldier who had been somewhere done, something seen the elephant. Just specialist rank, E4. Nothing remarkable, nothing worth noticing. She moved through the battalion area with practiced efficiency, past young privates whose conversation died when she approached, then resumed with snickers after she passed. Past the motor pool where mechanics were already shoulder-deep in engine blocks, hands black with grease, and faces tired from too many 18-hour days. Past company headquarters where officers hurried between buildings with folders tucked under arms and the weight of deadlines on their shoulders. Nobody noticed how she moved. Nobody saw how her eyes automatically tracked exits and corners and potential threats with the precision of someone who had operated in places where a missed detail meant death. Nobody noticed how her weight stayed balanced on the balls of her feet, ready to move in any direction instantly. Nobody noticed because nobody was looking. Inside Signal Battalion headquarters, familiar chaos greeted her. Phones ringing, printers humming, NCOs calling across cubicle walls, the smell of bad coffee and the faint ozone scent of overworked electronics. The machinery of military bureaucracy grinding forward with the inevitability of continental drift. Cade slipped into her cubicle in the back corner, the one with a view of the parking lot and a clear line to the emergency exit. She set down her coffee, powered up her computer, and pulled up the day's task list. Equipment accountability reports, radio maintenance logs, supply requisition forms. The kind of paperwork that kept battalions running but never made it into war stories. Morning, Ashford. She looked up. Staff Sergeant Martinez stood at the cubicle entrance, a stack of folders threatening to spill from his arms, and the expression of a man who'd already dealt with 3 crises before breakfast. Morning, Sergeant. Need a favor. These comm reports need consolidation and submission to brigade by 1400. Complex cross-referencing from 6 different systems. Think you can handle it? Cade glanced at the stack. 50 pages minimum. Data from multiple incompatible databases. The kind of job that would take most specialists an entire day and result in at least a dozen errors requiring corrections. Not a problem, Sergeant. Martinez blinked. You sure this is pretty technical? I'm sure. He set the stack on her desk, still looking uncertain. All right, but if you run into trouble, let me know. I can get someone to help. I won't need help, Sergeant, but thank you. After he left, Cade pulled the folders toward her and opened the first one. Her eyes scanned data with the speed of someone who had done this kind of work at much higher levels in much worse conditions with much higher stakes. Her fingers moved across the keyboard in steady rhythm. No hesitation, no backtracking, just quiet competence executed well below actual capability. 90 minutes later, she hit print. The consolidated report emerged perfectly formatted, accurately cross-referenced, ready for signature. She delivered it to Martinez's desk without comment. He looked up from his computer, glanced at the clock, then at the report in disbelief. You finished already? Yes, Sergeant. He flipped through pages. His eyebrows climbed higher with each section. This is flawless. How did you? Just admin work, Sergeant. Nothing special. But it was special. They both knew it. Martinez just didn't know why. Across the battalion area in a small office smelling of old coffee and older memories, retired Colonel Dalton Pierce sat reviewing training reports with the attention to detail that had kept him alive through Gulf War combat and a 30-year career. He was 67, silver-haired, lean, the permanent tan of a man who'd spent most of his adult life in desert climates. Technically retired, technically civilian. But the Army had a way of pulling men like Pierce back as consultants and advisors, unwilling to let go of institutional knowledge that couldn't be taught in classrooms. Through his window, he watched the battalion area, watched patterns of military life play out the way they had for generations, and watched Specialist Kate Ashford walk from headquarters toward the motor pool with a clipboard in hand. Something about how she moved nagged at him. He'd been observing her since his consulting assignment brought him to Fort Carson 3 weeks ago, watching and wondering and trying to identify what was wrong with the picture she presented. Nothing obvious, nothing he could articulate clearly, just an accumulation of small things. How her eyes scanned an area before entering. How her posture never quite relaxed even in supposedly safe spaces. How she moved through crowds without ever letting anyone inside her personal space unless she chose to allow it. He'd seen movement like that before, in Basra, in Kuwait, in classified operations that still made him wake sweating 30 years later. Operators moved like that, the kind of soldiers who worked in shadows and never got their names in newspapers. But Kate Ashford was a specialist, an admin clerk, someone who shuffled papers and maintained equipment logs, the kind of soldier who disappeared into military bureaucracy without leaving traces. So why did she move like someone who'd operated in hostile territory? Pierce made a note in his daily log. Continued observation warranted. Then returned to his reports, but his attention kept drifting back to the window. Back to the question, refusing to let go. Who are you really, Specialist Ashford? The motor pool smelled like diesel and hot metal and machines being pushed to their limits. Cade made her way between parked vehicles, checking serial numbers against her list marking equipment as accounted for or flagged for maintenance. Near the back, where communications equipment was staged for upcoming training, she found what she needed. A pallet of radio crates. 65 pounds of sensitive electronics packed in ruggedized cases designed to survive helicopter drops. Two mechanics stood nearby debating logistics. We need the forklift. No way we're lifting these by hand. Forklift's broken. Maintenance says 3 days minimum. Then we're screwed. These weigh a ton. Cade walked past them, glanced at the crate, made a decision that would later seem incredibly stupid. She set down her clipboard, bent at the knees, wrapped both hands around handles, and lifted. The crate came up smooth. Easy. She carried it 10 feet to the truck bed and set it down without visible effort. Then went back for her clipboard, made a notation, and continued her inventory. Behind her, the mechanic stood frozen. Did she just single-hand a 65-pound crate? That didn't look right. That looked way too easy. They watched her disappear around a building corner, their certainty about the world slightly shaken. Because specialists who pushed papers weren't supposed to be that strong, weren't supposed to move like that, weren't supposed to handle weight like it was nothing. But by the time they thought to ask questions, Kate Ashford had already vanished, invisible once again. The week turned over into routine, morning formations, equipment checks, endless paperwork. The comfortable rhythm of garrison life that most soldiers found either boring or comforting, depending on temperament. For Cade, it was penance. 7 years of penance performed in silence, accepted without complaint. She filed reports. She maintained logs. She organized supply manifests with the same precision she'd once used to coordinate combat operations. And she tried very hard not to think about Kandahar, about Marcus's voice on the radio, about the choice she'd made and the price he'd paid for it. But memories came anyway, in quiet moments, in spaces between tasks, in dreams that woke her at 3 a.m. with her heart racing and sheets soaked with sweat. She was good at hiding it, good at wearing the mask of the unremarkable specialist who just wanted to do her job and go home, good at being invisible. Until the day Major General Victor Hargrove decided to conduct a random uniform inspection. Hargrove was 54 and had never deployed to a combat zone, not once in 32 years of service. The kind of fact that didn't appear in his official biography, but that everyone working for him knew and quietly resented. He'd built his career on stateside assignments, staff positions, and a reputation for being a stickler for regulations. Some said he was bitter about missing combat. Others said he was relieved. Either way, he ruled his command with an iron fist and a hair-trigger temper, and God help the soldier who gave him an excuse to demonstrate his authority. That morning, he was walking through battalion headquarters with 2 aides trailing like pilot fish following a shark, checking uniforms, inspecting desks, finding fault with things that didn't matter because finding fault was the only way he knew how to lead. Cade was walking past with communication reports when Hargrove's eyes locked onto her. Specialist. Halt. She stopped immediately, came to attention. Perfect posture, eyes forward, shoulders back. Everything by the book. Hargrove circled her slowly, scanning for any imperfection, any excuse. The aides watched with the uncomfortable expressions of people who'd seen this performance too many times. Your bun is out of regulation, specialist. Cade said nothing. Her bun was perfect. They both knew it. But this wasn't about regulations. This was about power, about a general who needed to remind everyone in his command that he was in charge. Do you have nothing to say for yourself? No, sir. No, sir, what? No excuse, sir. Hargrove's jaw tightened. Her absolute composure seemed to irritate him more than defiance would have. He looked at her the way someone might look at a dog that refused to cower, and in his eyes was something ugly and small. He turned to an aide. Get me scissors. The aide hesitated. Sir. You heard me. Scissors, now. The aide scrambled to comply, returning moments later with office scissors. Orange handles. Dull blades designed for cutting paper, not hair. Hargrove took them. The sound of blades opening echoed in the sudden silence. People had stopped working. Everyone was watching now, sensing something terrible about to happen and unable to look away. When soldiers forget the basics, Hargrove said, his voice carrying through the room, sometimes they need a reminder of their place. He reached for Cade's hair. She didn't flinch, didn't move, just stood at attention, eyes focused somewhere past his shoulder as he grabbed a handful of dark hair and cut. The scissors weren't sharp enough to cut cleanly. They hacked, tore, pulled. Hair fell in uneven chunks onto her shoulders, onto the floor, drifted in the air like dark snow. He cut again and again, leaving her hair jagged and butchered and exposing a small scar on her scalp that nobody had known was there. Through it all, Cade stood perfectly still. Her face showed nothing. No pain, no humiliation, no emotion whatsoever. Just perfect absolute control that came from having survived far worse than a general with scissors and a petty need for dominance. This is what happens, Hargrove said, stepping back to admire his work, when soldiers forget their place. You're dismissed, specialist. Get that haircut fixed properly before end of day. Yes, sir, she saluted. He returned it with casual disdain. She turned and walked out with her spine straight and her stride unchanged, and pieces of her hair still falling from her uniform. In the hallway, Colonel Pierce stood where he had been watching from the doorway. He saw her emerge, saw the butchered hair and the small trickle of blood where scissors had nicked her scalp, saw her walk past him without a word, without a glance, without any acknowledgement that anything had happened. He watched her disappear down the hallway, watched the disciplined composure that never wavered. And in that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that something was profoundly wrong with the picture Cade Ashford presented to the world, because normal soldiers would be shaking, would be fighting back tears, would be radiating humiliation and rage. But Cade Ashford walked like someone who had endured far worse. She walked like someone who knew what real pain looked like, real loss, real consequences that made a general's cruelty seem like nothing more than background noise. Pierce returned to his office and opened his laptop. Time to do some digging. Time to find out who Specialist Cade Ashford really was. The next morning, Cade reported for duty at her usual time. She'd cut her hair properly the night before. Short now. Almost military regulation short, but not quite. The kind of haircut that said, "This is who I am now, take it or leave it." Whispers had already spread. By breakfast, the entire battalion knew. The general had cut a specialist's hair, as punishment, for a uniform infraction that probably didn't exist. Details varied depending on who told the story, but the core remained the same. Hargrove had publicly humiliated someone for no good reason, and that someone had taken it without a word. Some soldiers were appalled. Others shrugged it off. That's the military. That's how it works. Keep your head down and your mouth shut. But everyone was watching Cade now, waiting to see how she would react, waiting for the breakdown or the complaint or the transfer request that would inevitably follow. They waited in vain. Cade showed up, did her job, filed her reports, maintained her equipment logs, and gave absolutely no indication that anything had changed. A week later, the battalion scheduled a systems test, a simulated power failure designed to test backup procedures and troubleshooting capabilities. Standard training. Boring but necessary. The power went down at 1000 hours. Lights flickered and died. Computers went dark. Radios fell silent. Throughout the building, soldiers began the careful process of identifying problems and initiating backup protocols. In the communications room, a junior tech sergeant stood staring at a junction box with the expression of someone who'd just realized he was in over his head. The tangle of wires and circuit breakers and relay switches looked like something from a nightmare. This wasn't basic electrical work. This was complex systems engineering, and he didn't have training or certification to touch it. "We need to call division," he told his assistant. "Get one of their specialist techs out here." "That could take hours, Sergeant." "Then it takes hours. I'm not touching this. I don't even know where to start." Behind them, unnoticed, Cade had approached. She stood looking at the open junction box with an expression that Pierce, watching from across the room, that recognized immediately. She knew exactly what was wrong, knew how to fix it, and was debating whether revealing that knowledge was worth the questions it would raise. The debate lasted 3 seconds. Then duty won out over discretion. "Sergeant, may I take a look?" The tech sergeant turned, saw her, frowned. "Ashford, this isn't admin work. This is electrical engineering, high-level stuff." "I understand, Sergeant, but I have some experience with systems like this." "What kind of experience?" A pause. Careful calculation behind her eyes. "Enough to know what I'm looking at." The tech sergeant hesitated. They were wasting time. The longer power stayed down, the worse the training reports would look. And this specialist, for all her quietness, had never steered him wrong before. "All right, but if you make it worse, it's on you." Cade stepped forward. Her hands moved to the junction box with the confidence of someone who'd done this exact task dozens of times before in much worse conditions. She tightened 3 connections that had worked loose. Bridged 2 circuits with wire she pulled from her cargo pocket. The kind of wire not standard issue, but that someone who did this kind of work would carry automatically. Reset breaker sequences in an order that wasn't in any civilian manual, but matched classified military protocol exactly. 42 seconds after she touched the first wire, lights came back on. Computers rebooted. Radios crackled back to life. The tech sergeant stared at her, then at the junction box, then back at her. What's your actual MOS, Ashford?" 42A Sergeant, Admin Specialist." "That's not 42A work. That's warrant officer level systems engineering." Cade closed the junction box cover. "Just got lucky, Sergeant. Process of elimination." She walked away before he could ask more questions. But across the room, Colonel Pierce had watched the entire sequence, had seen how her hands moved, the absolute certainty of her actions, the muscle memory of someone who'd done that exact repair under much worse conditions than a training exercise. He pulled out his phone and he made a call to an old friend at JSOC headquarters, someone who owed him favors, someone who had access to classified personnel records. "I need you to look into someone for me," he said quietly. "Specialist Cade Ashford, currently assigned to Fort Carson. Something's not adding up, and I want to know why." The answer would come, but not yet, not before things got much more complicated. 3 days later, a Ranger unit arrived at Fort Carson for joint training coordination. They brought the swagger and scars of men who'd earned their reputation the hard way, and they moved through the base with the easy confidence of predators in familiar territory. One of them, Staff Sergeant Brooks, who'd done 2 tours with JSOC, happened to walk through the equipment staging area where Cade was adjusting radio mounts on a wall bracket. Routine work, mindless work, the kind of thing she could do without thinking. She reached up to secure a mount, her sleeve pulled back slightly. Just an inch, just enough. Brooks saw the tattoo, his eyes locked onto it with the focus of someone who recognized something significant. Coordinates, not decorative, not symbolic. Precise military grid reference format, the kind that operators sometimes marked on their bodies after missions that changed them. 31.5 degrees north, 65.8 degrees east. Kandahar Province, Afghanistan. Brooks had been to Kandahar, had worked operations in that exact region, And he knew that admin specialists didn't mark coordinates like that. Combat controllers did. ISR operators did. People who'd been in the thick of it and needed to remember. He approached, but she'd already pulled her sleeve down, already become aware of his attention. "Specialist, can I ask where you got that ink?" Cade's face remained neutral, professional. "Old mistake, Sergeant. Youthful stupidity. That's Kandahar province. That's not youthful stupidity format. That's operator ink. Is there something I can help you with, Sergeant?" The wall went up. Polite, professional, absolutely impenetrable. Brooks recognized the deflection for what it was, but he also recognized that pushing harder would get him nowhere. "No, specialist. My mistake. Have a good day." He walked away, but his mind was spinning. Admin clerks didn't have Kandahar coordinates tattooed on their forearms, and they didn't shut down questions with that kind of practiced efficiency. He found Pierce later that day in the mess hall. The old colonel was eating alone, reviewing reports with the dedication of someone who believed attention to detail could save lives. "Colonel Pierce, got a minute?" Pierce looked up, recognized the ranger tab, the combat patch, the particular worn look of someone who'd seen the elephant. "Of course, Sergeant. What can I do for you?" Brooks sat down, glanced around to ensure nobody was close enough to overhear. "There's a specialist in your battalion, Ashford. You know her." Pierce's interest sharpened immediately. "I've been observing her work. Why, she's got coordinates tattooed on her forearm. Kandahar province, exact grid reference format, the kind you get after something significant happens." "You're certain?" "Positive. I've operated in that exact area. That's not the kind of tattoo civilians get." "That's operator ink." Pierce leaned back in his chair, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. "I've been watching her for weeks," he said quietly. "Something's not right about her file. There are gaps, classifications, things that don't match with an admin specialist assignment." "You think she's undercover, some kind of investigation?" "I don't know what I think, but I intend to find out." The week rolled on. Training continued. Life on base followed its predictable patterns. And Kate Ashford continued to hide in plain sight, doing her job with quiet competence, avoiding attention, serving her penance, until the day she made a mistake at the rifle range. Qualification day. Soldiers rotating through to maintain marksmanship scores. Cade was there as support staff maintaining equipment accountability logging, who qualified and who needed remedial training. She stood behind the firing line with her clipboard watching without watching, present, but invisible. One of the privates was struggling. Stance wrong, elbow locked when it should have been flexible, breathing erratic instead of controlled, missing the target consistently, frustration building with each failed shot. The range instructor was trying to help, but his corrections were verbal and vague. "Adjust your position, control your breathing." Standard advice that wasn't specific enough to make a difference. Cade watched the private line up for another shot, saw exactly what was wrong, saw the solution as clearly as if someone had drawn it in the air. And without thinking, without remembering where she was or who she was supposed to be, she made the correction signal. A small downward flick of her hand, lower the elbow, a subtle wrist rotation, adjust the grip, 2 fingers tapped against her chest, breathing correction. The silent language of advanced combat instructors taught in schools that didn't exist in official records used by operators who worked in the dark. The private saw the gesture in his peripheral vision. His body responded automatically, muscles remembering basic training, making corrections without conscious thought. His next shot went center mass. Perfect grouping. The range instructor, a former special forces operator who'd seen those signals in places he couldn't talk about, whipped around. Who made that signal? Silence on the firing line. Everyone looking around. The instructor's eyes scanned faces until they locked onto Cade, her hand still lowered from the gesture, her face frozen in the realization that she'd just revealed something she couldn't explain. He walked toward her slowly. His expression was a mixture of disbelief and recognition. "Specialist Ashford, where did you learn that hand signal?" "I don't know what you mean, Sergeant." "That's a Tier 1 instructor methodology, advanced combat signal language. It's not in any basic manual. It's not taught in any conventional school. So where did you learn it?" "I was just stretching my wrists, Sergeant. Cramped from writing." The instructor stared at her, saw the wall go up, saw the absolute shutdown of any further discussion, and recognized that he was dealing with someone who'd been trained to deflect interrogation. He let it go, but he didn't forget. Later, he found Colonel Pierce. "Sir, I need to talk to you about Specialist Ashford." Pierce had been expecting this conversation, or something like it. The pieces were accumulating too fast now. Too many small revelations. Too many cracks in the facade. "Tell me everything," he said. And when the instructor finished, Pierce made a decision. Time to stop observing. Time to confront the mystery head-on. He found Cade in the supply room alone, organizing equipment manifests with the mechanical efficiency of someone trying to lose themselves in routine tasks. "Specialist Ashford, a moment of your time." She looked up, recognized him. Her face gave away nothing, but Pierce was good at reading people. Had spent decades learning how to see past the masks they wore. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" "I flew medevac helicopters in the Gulf War," Pierce said, closing the door behind him. 37 successful missions. Saw a lot of soldiers, a lot of different kinds of people under a lot of different kinds of stress. He moved closer, not threatening, just closing the distance enough to make eye contact inescapable. "And I learned to recognize certain patterns, the way operators move, the way they scan a room even when they're pretending not to pay attention, the way they maintain awareness of exits and corners and potential threats without ever seeming to look." Cade said nothing, just waited. "You move like the special operations soldiers I worked with," Pierce continued. "The ones who operated in places that don't appear on any map. The ones who did things that will never make it into any official history. And I want to know why." "I'm just admin, sir." "No specialist. You're not." He let the words hang in the air between them. "And I'm going to find out who you really are." For a moment, just a fraction of a second, something flickered across Cade's face. Not fear, not anger. Something deeper. Something that looked almost like relief at finally being seen. Then the wall came back up. Perfect and impenetrable. "If you have questions about my service record, sir, you're welcome to review it through official channels." "I already tried. Do you know what I found?" "Sir, classification markers. Restricted access files. Security protocols that shouldn't exist for an E4 admin specialist." He paused. "Things that tell me you're not what you appear to be." Silence. Heavy and loaded with things neither of them could say. "I'm going to find out the truth," Pierce said quietly. "Not to hurt you, not to expose you, but because I think you need someone to know. I think you've been carrying something alone for too long, and it's killing you slowly." He turned to leave, paused at the door. "When you're ready to talk, I'll be ready to listen." "And specialist." She looked up. "Whatever you're running from hiding isn't the same as healing. Eventually you have to face it." And then he was gone, leaving Kate alone in the supply room, surrounded by the quiet machinery of military logistics, her carefully constructed invisibility beginning to crumble around her. That night, in her small off-base apartment, Cade sat on her bed and stared at an old photograph. Afghanistan, 2018. Two people in tactical gear, faces partially visible, both smiling at some forgotten joke. Herself and Marcus Kane, before Copper Viper, before the impossible choice, before everything fell apart. She traced the outline of his face with one finger. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she whispered to the silence. "I tried to stay invisible. I really tried." The photograph offered no answers, just memories. Just the weight of 7 years of silence pressing down like gravity. Outside, Fort Carson settled into nighttime routine. Lights dimming in barracks. Guard posts changing. The eternal rhythm of a military base that never truly sleeps. And somewhere in the administrative offices, a notice was being prepared. Joint training exercise. Major coordination event. Rangers Special Forces Aviation Units. The largest communications integration test the base had run in 5 years. All personnel required to support. No exceptions, including one specialist, Cade Ashford, who was about to discover that some secrets are too powerful to stay buried forever. The announcement came 3 days after Pierce's confrontation in the supply room. Joint training exercise. Major multi-unit coordination. The biggest communications integration test Fort Carson had attempted in half a decade. Rangers from the 75th, Special Forces teams, aviation elements from the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, intelligence support assets, all converging to test a network so complex that if one piece failed, the entire system would collapse like a house of cards. The briefing room filled with bodies and noise and the particular energy that precedes something significant. Officers claim front rows, NCOs clustered along walls. Junior enlisted scattered throughout taking notes, trying to look engaged, while secretly wondering how this would affect their weekend plans. Cade sat in the back corner, invisible as always, clipboard in hand, tablet powered on. The picture of an admin specialist preparing to track equipment accountability while real soldiers did actual work. On the screen, at the front, a major from operations clicked through slides showing network architecture, frequency allocations, drone coverage patterns, satellite uplink schedules, the kind of complex coordination requiring everything to work perfectly or risk catastrophic failure. This is the most integrated communications network we've ever attempted to run simultaneously, the major said, his laser pointer dancing across the screen. Ground units, aviation assets, ISR platforms, all feeding through a single tactical operations center. If anything fails, the entire exercise goes dark. No redundancy built in. This is pass or fail. Cade studied the network diagram. Her eyes tracked data flows, backup protocols, potential failure points. She saw 3 critical vulnerabilities immediately. Saw exactly where the system would break if anything went wrong. Saw how to fix it if it did. Then she closed her eyes and reminded herself that she was just a specialist with a clipboard, that her job was to log equipment and stay invisible, that revealing knowledge like that would raise questions she couldn't afford to answer. Colonel Pierce sat in the observation section, ostensibly reviewing training objectives, but actually watching Cade. He'd spent the last 72 hours trying to access her classified files through every back channel cultivated over 3 decades. Every attempt denied. Every request hitting walls marked with classifications requiring clearances he no longer possessed, which told him everything he needed to know. Specialists with clean records didn't have files locked behind Tier 1 security protocols. He watched her study the network diagram, saw her eyes move across the screen, analyzing, calculating, saw the moment she closed her eyes and forced herself to look away. The body language of someone who knew too much and was trying desperately not to show it. The briefing ended. Personnel filed out toward assigned positions. Cade gathered her equipment and headed for the Tactical Operations Center, a temporary structure erected on the training grounds. Inside, the space hummed with activity. Technicians running final systems checks, officers reviewing mission parameters, radio operators testing frequencies. She found her assigned corner in the rear, a folding table, a laptop connected to the accountability network, a radio receiver tuned to monitor status reports, the kind of position that kept someone busy but uninvolved, visible but irrelevant. The exercise began at 1000 hours, smooth and professional. Ground units reported in from positions. Helicopters lifted off from the airfield, their positions appearing as icons on digital map displays. Drones climbed to altitude camera feeds, painting the training area in high-definition detail across multiple screens. For 8 minutes and 43 seconds, everything worked perfectly. Then the static started. It began as a barely audible pop on one radio net, then another, like someone flipping a switch on and off. The communications specialist frowned, adjusted controls, tried to compensate. The static spread. "Sir, I'm getting interference on Tactical Net 3. The operations officer looked up from his display. "Source, unknown, sir, and it's spreading fast." The static jumped from channel to channel like a virus, corrupting clean audio, drowning out transmissions. Within 30 seconds, half the radio nets were compromised. Within a minute, they were all gone. Just dead air and white noise where voices should have been. Switch to backup frequencies. Technicians moved, fast fingers flying over keyboards, trying to route communications through alternate channels. The backup nets came online for approximately 15 seconds before they too dissolved into static. Then video feeds started failing. Drone cameras freezing mid-frame. Satellite imagery pixelating into abstract patterns. Helicopter telemetry vanishing from displays as if the aircraft had simply ceased to exist. What the hell is happening? "I don't know, sir. It's cascading. Everything's going down simultaneously." The operations officer grabbed a hardline phone. "Get me division comms. We need their tech specialists here now." The phone was dead. The cascade failure had taken everything. Radio, video, data, even landlines running back to main post. The Tactical Operations Center had become an isolated bubble of increasingly panicked soldiers staring at dead screens and silent radios. 3 helicopters were in the air, somewhere, with no way to communicate positions or receive navigation updates. Ground units scattered across 20 square miles with no way to coordinate or report status. Drones operating on pre-programmed flight patterns with no way to adjust if something went wrong. This was the nightmare scenario, the one that killed people in real combat. And in the training environment, it was an unmitigated disaster that would generate weeks of investigations and recriminations. The senior communications sergeant, a veteran with 20 years of experience, stood staring at his systems with the expression of someone watching their career implode. "I need 4 hours minimum to diagnose this, maybe 8 to actually fix it." "We don't have 8 hours, the operations officer snapped. "We have birds in the air, units spread across the training area. We need comms now, or we abort the entire exercise and explain to brigade why we just wasted $100,000 and embarrassed ourselves in front of JSOC observers." In the back corner, unnoticed by everyone except Colonel Pierce, Kate Ashford had gone absolutely still. Her eyes closed. Her breathing changed, adopting a specific pattern. 4 count inhale, 4 count hold, 4 count exhale. Combat breathing. The kind taught in schools preparing soldiers for high-stress decision-making under fire. Pierce recognized it immediately, had learned the same technique in survival school 40 years ago. He leaned forward in his observation seat, watching intently. Cade's eyes opened, and the person looking out was no longer Specialist Ashford, invisible admin clerk. This was someone else entirely. Someone harder. Someone who had stood in a burning buildings and made impossible choices and carried the weight of American lives on her shoulders. She stood, moved toward the auxiliary control station with smooth, purposeful strides. No hesitation, no uncertainty, just absolute confidence of someone who had done this before. A tech specialist saw her approaching the restricted panel. "Specialist, that area requires senior certification. You can't," she ignored him, opened the access panel with movements betraying complete familiarity. Her hands moved to controls, fingers already dancing across interfaces requiring advanced training even to understand. "Specialist Ashford, step away from that panel immediately." She didn't step away, didn't acknowledge the order. Her focus had narrowed to a single point. Fix the problem, get the systems online, save the mission. Everything else was noise. Her hands flew across the keyboard, typing speed that didn't look human. 140 words per minute with 0 errors, bypassing security protocols requiring warrant officer authorization, using backdoor sequences not in any manual. The senior comm sergeant moved toward her, intention to physically remove her clear. Then he saw what she was doing on the screen and froze. How does she know those access codes? Nobody answered, nobody knew. They just watched as this unremarkable specialist performed what looked like dark magic, her fingers moving with surgical precision and combat operator speed. She reached for the emergency communications handset, the one connected to backup systems existing outside the main network, designed for worst-case scenarios, requiring specific authorization codes to activate. She keyed it without hesitation, and when she spoke, her voice had transformed completely. Gone was the quiet, deferential tone of the admin clerk. This voice carried command authority, tactical precision, the absolute certainty of someone who had talked pilots through landing zones under fire and coordinated strikes with seconds to spare. All call signs, this is Overwatch. Emergency protocol Alpha 79er is now active. Aviation units switch to alternate frequency 243.5. Drone operators initiate manual override sequence Delta 42 Echo. Ground units hold current positions and stand by for alternate comms on tactical backup net. The operations officer whipped around. Who authorized her to... But he stopped mid-sentence, because on screens around the tent, things were happening. Drone feeds flickered, steadied, resolved into clear images. Radio nets crackled with static, then cleared, voices emerging from the white noise like ghosts materializing. Helicopter telemetry reappeared on tracking displays, positions, updating in real time. Cade continued issuing commands in that same clipped, professional tone. Her hands moved across multiple control interfaces, simultaneously rebuilding the network from the ground up, routing traffic through systems that technically shouldn't handle this kind of load, but somehow were. 37 seconds after she touched the first control, the entire communications network was back online. Full functionality. Every system green, as if the failure had never happened. The tent fell into profound quiet. 43 people staring at Specialist Kate Ashford like she had just performed a miracle, or revealed herself to be something they didn't have words for. She lowered the handset slowly, her hands shaking slightly now. Adrenaline, the aftershock of high-stress performance. She looked around at all the eyes focused on her, and reality crashed back in. She had just blown her cover completely. Spectacularly. In front of Rangers and Special Forces operators and JSOC observers and half the senior leadership of Fort Carson. "Oh no," she whispered. "No, no, no." The Ranger captain was first to find his voice. "Specialist Ashford, what is your actual military occupational specialty?" 42A, sir, admin. "That's a lie. I just watched you restore a network 3 certified technicians said was impossible to fix. You use protocols I've only seen in Joint Special Operations Command." "Who are you really?" Before she could answer, the tent flap opened. Major General Victor Hargrove strode in, 2 aides in his wake, his face set in barely controlled rage. "Someone want to explain why I just received a report that a specialist took unauthorized control of classified communications systems?" He stopped when he saw the room, saw every Ranger at attention, saw Special Forces operators and aviation crew and intelligence specialists all facing the same direction, all looking at Cade with expressions ranging from shock to awe to dawning recognition. "What the hell is going on here?" Colonel Pierce stood from his observation position, pulled out his tablet, moved to the front where a projection screen still displayed network diagrams. "General Hargrove, I think you need to see something." "Not now, Pierce. I'm dealing with a breach of protocol." "Sir, trust me, you need to see this right now." Something in Pierce's tone cut through Hargrove's bluster. The general stopped, looked at the older man, saw the gravity in his expression. Pierce connected his tablet to the projector. The network diagrams disappeared, replaced by an image that made every operator in the tent straighten slightly. Afghanistan, 2018. A woman in full tactical gear, plate carrier loaded with magazines, radio headset, the dust and heat of Kandahar province visible in every detail. On her vest, stenciled in black letters, Ghost 6. Next image. An official military portrait. Same face. Younger. Harder. Eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. Caption: CW3 Kate Ashford, ISR Combat Controller, Joint Special Operations Command. The weight of revelation settled over the tent like a physical thing. Pierce's voice when he spoke was quiet but carried to every corner. Her real name is Chief Warrant Officer 3 Kate Ashford. She was attached to a JSOC task force from 2018 to 2019. Call sign Ghost 6. He advanced the slides. More images, tactical maps, after-action reports with most text redacted. She wasn't just an ISR controller. She was the primary controller for Tier 1 operations in Regional Command, South Afghanistan. A few heads nodded. The Ranger captain's eyes widened with recognition. September 15, 2018. Operation Copper Viper. Joint SEAL and Ranger assault on a Taliban stronghold. High-value target compound. Pierce paused, let the numbers sink in. Intel estimated 20 to 30 enemy combatants. They walked into an ambush. Over 200 Taliban fighters. Pre-planned kill zone. 2 SEAL teams and a Ranger platoon pinned down and taking casualties. He looked at Cade. She had gone very still, her face pale, her eyes fixed on something far beyond the tent walls. Chief Ashford coordinated the entire battle from a remote tactical operations center. 6 hours of continuous combat operations. The Ranger captain was nodding now, memory clearly returning. "I remember the after-action report. Classified, but rumors went everywhere. They said it was impossible. One controller managing that many assets simultaneously." "It wasn't a team," Pierce said quietly. It was her. Just her. He let that sink in, then advanced to the next slide. A commendation citation, most of it redacted, but the header visible bronze star with valor. 47 personnel extracted without a single friendly fatality. 52 enemy killed in action. She was offered the Medal of Honor. Classified citation. She refused it. Refused promotion to CW4. Instead, she requested discharge from JSOC. Requested demotion to E4. Requested reassignment to admin duties. Hargrove had sat down heavily in a chair. His face had gone gray. His hands trembled slightly as they gripped the armrests. The Army granted her request, Pierce continued. Protective protocol, fresh start, a chance to serve in peace after serving in war. He turned off the projector, looked at Hargrove directly. And 3 weeks ago, you cut her hair as punishment for a uniform infraction that didn't exist. The words hung in the air like an indictment. Around the tent, soldiers who had mocked Cade, who had dismissed her, who had made jokes about desk jockeys and failed washouts, stood in various states of shock and shame. The Special Forces Master Sergeant near the communications rack broke the heavy quiet, his voice rough with emotion. Ma'am, I need to know, why would someone with your record choose to be a clerk? Why hide this? Cade finally moved, finally looked at the faces surrounding her, and for the first time in 7 years, she told the truth. Because every time I put on that headset, I see him dying. Outside the Tactical Operations Center, away from the eyes and questions and weight of revelation, Cade sat on a concrete barrier and stared at a photograph she'd carried in her wallet for 7 years. 2 people, Afghanistan, before Copper Viper, before the ambush, before the impossible choice, both smiling at some forgotten joke, her and Marcus Kane when the world still made sense and the cost of service hadn't yet been paid in full. She heard footsteps approaching, knew who it was before he spoke. Hargrove moved like a man who'd aged a decade in the last hour. Chief Warrant Officer Ashford. It's Specialist Ashford now, sir. He flinched at the correction, sat down on the barrier beside her without invitation. For a long moment, neither spoke. Just sat in the afternoon sun while Fort Carson continued its routines around them, oblivious to the small earthquake that had occurred in 110 on the training grounds. I owe you an apology, Hargrove finally said, but I don't think words exist that could cover what I did. Cade said nothing, just looked at the photograph. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why let me? Why let everyone? Because I wanted to be invisible, sir. That was the whole point. But why would someone with your record choose this? She turned to look at him then, and he saw in her eyes something he'd never seen before in all his years of service. The kind of pain that comes from choices with no good answer. Because every time I hear gunfire, I'm back in that tactical operations center. Every time someone keys a radio, I hear his voice asking for help I couldn't give. Every time I close my eyes, I see Warrant Officer Marcus Kane bleeding out while I stayed on the net and finished the mission. Her voice was steady, too steady, the kind of control that comes from practice, from 7 years of holding it together. He was my partner, my mentor, my friend, and when our position came under attack, when he got hit by falling debris and started dying, I had a choice. Leave the net and try to save him, or stay on the net and save the 47 Americans counting on me. Hargrove's breath caught. I stayed on the net, coordinated the extractions, called the strikes, talked every single person out of that ambush. She looked back at the photograph, and Marcus bled out waiting for help that came too late because I chose the mission over him. You saved 47 lives, I know. The Army gave me a medal for it, offered me a promotion, called me a hero. Her voice cracked slightly. But heroes don't let their partners die. Heroes don't make choices like that. You made the right tactical decision. I know that too, sir. In my head, I know it. Marcus even told me to stay, ordered me to finish the mission. A tear slipped down her cheek. But my heart doesn't care about tactics. My heart just knows that I chose to let him die. And I couldn't be Ghost 6 anymore. Couldn't put on that headset and make those choices and carry that weight. So I asked to disappear, to serve in a way that didn't require me to decide who lives and who dies. Hargrove sat with that, processing. understanding finally why his punishment had been so much worse than he could have imagined. He hadn't just humiliated a specialist, he'd reopened wounds that had never really healed. "I've never deployed," he said quietly. 32 years of service. Never left the continental United States. Not once. Cade looked at him. "I built my entire career on enforcing standards I never had to live by, on being the strict disciplinarian who kept soldiers in line. And I told myself that was valuable, that it mattered." He laughed bitterly. "You did more in one night than I've done in 3 decades, and I had the arrogance to cut your hair like you were nothing." "Every role matters, sir. Admin matters. Logistics matters. Don't do that. Don't make excuses for me." "I'm not. I mean it. Marcus used to say that every gear in the machine matters, that the people keeping the base running are just as important as the people pulling triggers." She paused. "But you didn't treat me like I mattered, sir. You treated me like I was broken, like I needed to be fixed through humiliation." The truth hit him like a physical blow. "What do you want from me?" he asked, voice rough. "Tell me and I'll do it." "I don't want anything from you, sir, but the 800 soldiers on this base deserve better than fear. They deserve a leader who builds them up instead of tearing them down to feel powerful." She stood, looked down at him still sitting on the concrete. "I chose to be invisible because I couldn't handle being Ghost 6 anymore. You chose to rule through intimidation because you've never had to test yourself any other way. We're both hiding, sir, just from different things." She walked away, leaving Hargrove alone with his shame and realizations and the uncomfortable understanding that rank meant nothing measured against actual courage. The sun was setting when Colonel Pierce found her. She was at the rifle range sitting in the observation tower, staring downrange at targets nobody was shooting. Just sitting, still, processing everything that had happened. He climbed the stairs quietly, sat down beside her without speaking. An old soldier's understanding that sometimes silence is the only appropriate response to pain. They sat together for 5 minutes before he finally spoke. 1991, Gulf War. I was flying medevac missions out of a forward operating base near the Iraqi border. Cade turned slightly, listening. "My crew was the best. Pilot, co-pilot, 2 medics. We'd worked together for 18 months. Could practically read each other's minds. Flew 37 successful missions together." He paused. "On mission 38, we had a mechanical failure. Hydraulics went out over open desert. We went down hard." His hands tightened slightly on the railing. "I was in the co-pilot seat, survived with a broken arm and some cuts. Everyone else died on impact. My pilot, my friend of 12 years, both medics, all gone. And I was the only one who walked away. I'm sorry, sir. I spent 20 years thinking I should have died with them. 20 years of survivor's guilt. 20 years wondering why I got to live when they didn't. I drank too much, pushed away everyone who tried to help, nearly destroyed my marriage and career." He looked at her directly. "Then one day a chaplain asked me a question. He said, 'Did they die so you could waste the rest of your life?' And it hit me. My crew didn't sacrifice themselves, so I could spend decades drowning in guilt. They died doing their jobs. And my job was to survive and make their sacrifice mean something." Cade's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Marcus Kane didn't die so you could file paperwork for 7 years, Cade." She looked away. "You don't understand." "I understand exactly. You think if you hide long enough, if you make yourself small enough, if you punish yourself sufficiently, somehow it'll balance the scales. Somehow it'll make his death mean less." Pierce's voice was gentle but firm. "But it doesn't work that way. The scales don't balance. The guilt doesn't fade. All that happens is you waste the life he bought for you with his sacrifice." "I can't be Ghost 6 anymore." "Then be something else. Be the instructor who trains the next generation of controllers. Be the mentor who makes sure the next Cade Ashford doesn't have to learn everything the hard way. Be the leader who turns Marcus's lessons into something that outlives both of you." He pulled out his tablet, showed her an official document, Pentagon letterhead. "I put in some calls, called in every favor I had left. This is a reinstatement order. Chief Warrant Officer, 3 full benefits, back pay clean record. New assignment ISR Training Command." Cade stared at the document like it was a weapon. You'd be teaching, not operating, training the next generation, passing forward what Marcus taught you, what you learned in Kandahar, making sure those lessons don't die with you. I don't know if I can. Yes, you can. You stood perfectly still while a general humiliated you. You restored an impossible network in 37 seconds under pressure that would break most people. You're not broken, Cade. You're healing. But hiding isn't healing. It's just slower dying. He stood, left the tablet on the railing beside her. Think about it. Take your time. But ask yourself one question. What would Marcus want you to do? He descended the stairs, leaving her alone with the sunset and the photograph and the decision that would determine the rest of her life. Cade sat in the observation tower as the sun dropped below the mountains and the sky turned the colors of fire. She pulled out the photograph again. Marcus Kane smiling at the camera, young and alive, and full of confidence that comes from not yet knowing how things end. "What do I do, Marcus?" she whispered. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of evening formation from the main post. The American flag snapping in the breeze. The eternal rhythm of a military base preparing for nightfall. She looked at the reinstatement document, then at the photograph, then at the rifle range stretching out before her empty and waiting. For 7 years she'd been running, hiding, serving penance for a choice that had saved 47 lives at the cost of one. For 7 years she'd made herself invisible, convinced that disappearing was the only way to honor Marcus's sacrifice. But Pierce was right. Marcus hadn't died so she could waste her life on guilt. He died buying time for her to save those Americans, and he would want her to keep saving them, to pass forward the lessons he'd taught her, to make his death mean something more than just an ending. The decision crystallized slowly, not in a moment of revelation, but in gradual understanding that came from finally accepting a truth she'd been avoiding for 7 years. She picked up the tablet, looked at the reinstatement order one more time. Then she made a phone call. "Colonel Pierce, this is Ashford. I need to talk to you about that offer." In the distance, the base settled into evening routine. Lights coming on in barracks, guard posts changing, the flag being lowered with ceremony and respect. And in the observation tower of an empty rifle range, a woman who'd been hiding for 7 years finally decided to come back to life. The morning after Cade's decision, Colonel Pierce found her waiting outside his office at 0600 hours. She stood at parade rest, her posture perfect, her expression calm but different somehow. Like a weight had been partially lifted, not gone. It would never be gone, but redistributed in a way that made it bearable. "Colonel Pierce, I've made my decision." He unlocked his office door, gestured her inside. The space smelled of old coffee and older memories. Deployment photos lined the walls. Commendations from 3 decades of service hung in neat rows. A coffee maker that had seen better days but still produced something drinkable sat in the corner, already gurgling to life on its automatic timer. "I'll accept the reinstatement," she said without preamble. "On one condition." Pierce poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one. The ceramic was warm against her palms. "Name it." "I don't want to teach at some school in Virginia, some sterile classroom where I never see the soldiers I'm training actually use what I teach them." She wrapped both hands around the cup. "I want to start here, Fort Carson, with the soldiers who need it most. The ones who mocked you for the last 7 months. The ones who don't know any better yet." She met his eyes. "If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to honor what Marcus gave his life for, I need to start with the people right in front of me. The ones struggling, the ones getting overlooked, the ones who think they're not good enough because nobody's shown them they are." Pierce studied her face, saw the determination there, the beginning of purpose replacing penance. After 30 years of evaluating soldiers, he knew the difference between someone running towards something and someone running away from it. "I can make that happen. But you understand what you're signing up for. You'll be putting yourself on display, being visible, everything you have been avoiding for 7 years." "I know," her voice was steady. "Marcus used to say that the hardest missions are the ones you choose for yourself. That anyone can follow orders, but it takes real courage to define your own service." He was a wise man. He was, and he deserved better than a partner who spent 7 years hiding from his legacy. She took a sip of coffee. It was terrible, but somehow that made it perfect. I'm done hiding, Colonel. The paperwork moved faster than anyone expected. Pentagon approval came through in 48 hours. Orders cut within 72. Rank officially restored. Chief Warrant Officer 3 Kate Ashford assigned to Fort Carson ISR Training Development. Mission identify and train the next generation of combat controllers. The formal ceremony was scheduled for the following week, but Cade didn't wait. Waiting was for people who weren't sure. She was sure now. The morning after her orders came through, she showed up at the battalion training office and requested a list of struggling soldiers. Junior enlisted who were behind on qualifications, who couldn't seem to master basic skills, who were one administrative action away from being shown the door. The training NCO, a grizzled staff sergeant with 23 years in service, looked at her with confusion and something that might have been respect. Ma'am, you're a warrant officer now. You don't need to deal with remedial training. That's enlisted work. We've got NCOs for that. Every soldier is my work now, Sergeant. I need that list. He handed it over without further argument. 17 names, most of them privates, first class or specialists, most of them struggling with marksmanship or physical fitness, or the kind of tactical thinking that separated competent soldiers from excellent ones. The kind of soldiers that most units would wash out or reassign to non-combat roles because it was easier than actually fixing the problem. One name jumped out immediately. PFC Bryn Sawyer, 22 years old, female, recently assigned to Fort Carson from AIT. Rifle qualification score 23 out of 40, barely passing. Notes indicated she was having trouble with confidence under pressure. Recommended for additional training or possible reclassification to non-combat MOS. Cade remembered being 22, remembered struggling to prove herself in a world that didn't always believe women belonged in combat roles. Remembered the voices, both external and internal, that said she wasn't strong enough, wasn't tough enough, wasn't good enough. She found Sawyer in the equipment bay that afternoon. The young soldier was alone, organizing radio components with the mechanical focus of someone trying to lose herself in routine tasks, trying to be invisible, trying not to be noticed because being noticed meant being criticized. Cade recognized the pattern, had lived it herself. Sawyer looked up when Cade approached, saw the warrant officer rank, and immediately snapped to attention with the rigid posture of someone who expected to be yelled at. Ma'am, at ease, Private, I'm Chief Ashford. I run the ISR training program. Sawyer's face showed confusion mixed with worry. Ma'am, I'm not in IS. I'm just regular signal, communications equipment, maintenance. I know what your current assignment is, but I've been reviewing qualification scores across the battalion, and I think you have potential that's not being developed properly. With respect, ma'am, my scores say otherwise. The words came out flat, defeated, the voice of someone who had already accepted failure as inevitable. Cade smiled slightly, not mocking, understanding. Scores measure current performance, Private. I'm interested in future capability. You free this afternoon? Ma'am, I'm supposed to help with equipment inventory until 1700. Consider yourself reassigned to special training. Meet me at the rifle range at 1400 hours. Cade turned to leave, then paused. And Private, bring an open mind. That's all I ask. The afternoon sun was brutal on the firing range. Mid-June in Colorado meant heat that shimmered off the concrete and made the air taste like metal and dust. The range smelled of gun oil and hot brass and the particular scent of a place where thousands of rounds had been fired over thousands of hours. It was a smell Cade had once loved, then learned to hate, and was now slowly learning to make peace with. Sawyer showed up at exactly 1400 hours, nervous, uncertain, carrying her M4 like it was something foreign and slightly dangerous, like it belonged to someone else, and she was just borrowing it under false pretenses. Cade was already there checking target stands, making sure the range was clear and safe, making sure the environment was right because environment mattered. Marcus had taught her that. Create the right space, and people will rise to fill it. She turned when Sawyer approached. Show me your last qualification. Exactly how you shot it. Don't try to do it better. Just show me what actually happened. Sawyer moved to the firing line, assumed her stance. It was technically correct by the manual, but fundamentally wrong in ways that took experience to see. Her weight was too far back on her heels instead of balanced forward. Her grip on the rifle was too tight, strangling the weapon instead of controlling it. Her breathing was erratic and shallow, fighting her body instead of working with it. Fire when ready. Sawyer took the shot, missed the target completely. She flinched before the trigger broke, already anticipating the recoil, already fighting the weapon before the round even left the barrel. Again, another miss, this one closer but still outside the scoring rings. Sawyer's jaw tightened with frustration. That's what I did on qualification, ma'am. 23 barely qualifying shots out of 40 attempts, 17 complete misses. They told me I should consider reclassifying to supply or admin, something where I don't need to shoot. Cade moved to stand beside her, close enough to see the tension in her shoulders, the defeat in her eyes. You're fighting the rifle, and you're fighting yourself. Every shot you're thinking about, all the ones you've already missed, all the voices telling you you're not good enough, all the people who think you don't belong here. Am I right? Sawyer's voice came out small. Yes, ma'am. Put the rifle down. Sawyer set it on the bench, looking confused and worried, probably thinking this was the moment when the warrant officer would confirm what everyone else had been saying, that she wasn't cut out for this, that she should quit while she still had some dignity left. Instead, Cade said, your problem isn't technical. It's mental. You've convinced yourself that you can't shoot, so you're proving yourself right with every round you fire. That's the first thing we're going to fix. Not your stance, not your grip, your mind. For the next hour, Cade worked with Sawyer on fundamentals that went deeper than mechanics. She taught her the breathing pattern that had kept her calm during 6 hours of combat in Kandahar province, the mental discipline that separated thought from action, the understanding that the weapon was just a tool and tools only did what the person holding them allowed. Inhale on the countdown, 4 counts in, exhale halfway, 4 counts out. Hold in the space between heartbeats. That's where you squeeze the trigger. In that pause, when everything is still, and your body is calm, and your mind is clear, and there's nothing in the world except you and the target and the job that needs doing. Sawyer tried it. Her first shot went wide, but not by much. Progress. Again, don't think about the last shot. There is no last shot. There is no next shot. There's only this shot, this moment, this trigger press. Everything else is just noise. The second shot hit the outer ring. Sawyer gasped, her eyes going wide with something that looked like hope. Again. Third shot, inner ring. Fourth shot, center mass. By the 10th shot, Sawyer was grouping tight enough to pass expert qualification with room to spare. She lowered the rifle with shaking hands. Not from fear this time, from the adrenaline rush of success, from the shock of discovering that maybe she wasn't broken after all. How did you do that? How did you fix me in an hour when I've been failing for months? I didn't fix you, Private. You were never broken. You just needed someone to show you what you were actually capable of. Cade picked up a box of ammunition from the bench. Now we're going to do that 40 more times, then 400 more times over the next few weeks, until it's not something you think about, until it's muscle memory, until you can do it, tired, stressed, scared, under pressure, and still put rounds exactly where they need to go. They worked until the sun started dropping toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reminded Cade of other sunsets in other places. Sawyer's scores climbed steadily. By the end of the session, she was consistently shooting expert qualification numbers. When they finally cleared the range and secured the weapons, Sawyer turned to Cade with something like wonder in her eyes. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you doing this? Why spend your time on someone like me? Someone who's probably going to wash out anyway. Cade was quiet for a moment. Then, because someone did it for me once. His name was Marcus Kane. He was the best teacher I ever had. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And he taught me that the greatest service isn't pulling the trigger, or coordinating the strike, or making the perfect tactical call. She met Sawyer's eyes. It's teaching the next person to do all of those things better than you ever could. It's passing forward the knowledge so it doesn't die with you. Over the following weeks, the training program took shape like something organic, growing, evolving. Cade started with Sawyer and 3 other struggling soldiers. Basic skills, marksmanship, radio procedures, map reading. The kind of foundational work that most units did poorly because they didn't have time or patience or the right instructors. But Cade had all three. She had the time because this was now her full-time mission, not something squeezed between other duties. She had the patience because she understood that excellence came from repetition and encouragement, not from punishment and fear. And she had the teaching ability that came from having done the work at the highest possible level and survived to talk about it. Word spread through the battalion the way word always spreads in military units. Quietly at first, whispered conversations in the smoke pit and the chow hall. That new warrant officer, the one who turned out to be some kind of badass operator from Afghanistan, she's running training sessions that actually work. Soldiers who were about to get chaptered out are suddenly qualifying expert. People who couldn't hit a target 3 months ago are outscoring the infantry guys. Soldiers who weren't in the program started asking to join. NCOs who had written off certain privates as hopeless cases started seeing dramatic improvements and wondering what had changed. Within a month, Cade had 12 students. Within 2 months, 24. The informal afternoon training sessions became a formal program with official designation and command approval. She taught them technical skills, how to manage multiple communications nets under stress without losing track of any single conversation, how to read tactical situations from incomplete information, how to make decisions when all the available options were bad and people's lives hung in the balance, and there was no time for perfect solutions. But more importantly, more fundamentally, she taught them confidence. She taught them that failure was just information about what didn't work, not a judgment on their worth as soldiers or human beings. That mistakes were opportunities to learn if you had the courage to examine them honestly. That the voice in your head saying you weren't good enough was a liar that could be silenced through practice and discipline and the simple act of showing up every day and doing the work. Colonel Pierce watched the program grow with quiet satisfaction. He saw Cade transform from the broken hiding specialist into someone who looked like she had found her purpose again. Not the same purpose she'd had in Kandahar. Something different. Something that involved building up instead of calling down fire. Creating instead of destroying. Passing forward instead of carrying alone. She's a natural teacher, he told the battalion commander during a quarterly review meeting. Better than anyone I've seen in 30 years of service. The soldiers love her, the commander agreed, reviewing statistics on his tablet. And her results speak for themselves. Qualification scores across the battalion are up 15% since she started the program. Retention is up, morale is up. We're getting requests from other battalions asking if they can send their struggling soldiers to her for training. More importantly, Pierce said, she's changing how people think about service. She doesn't teach soldiers to be warriors. She teaches them to be professionals. There's a difference. The commander looked up from his tablet. Explain. Warriors fight, professionals win. Warriors rely on aggression and courage. Professionals rely on skill and discipline. Warriors are born, professionals are built. Pierce gestured toward the window where Cade could be seen on a distant training field working with a group of students. She's building professionals, and professionals are what actually win wars. 6 months after accepting reinstatement, Cade stood on Fort Carson's parade field in full dress uniform. The ceremony was small by military standards. No media, no publicity, no politicians looking for photo opportunities. Just the soldiers she had trained, the officers who had supported her program, and the handful of people who knew the full story of who she had been and what she had done and why she had spent 7 years trying to disappear. The Pentagon representative was a colonel who had served in Afghanistan during the same period Cade had operated there. He understood what the Bronze Star with Valor represented even in its unclassified form. When he pinned it to her chest, his hands trembled slightly. For exceptionally valorous achievement in combat operations Afghanistan 2018, Chief Warrant Officer Ashford's actions under extreme duress resulted in 0 friendly casualties and successful mission completion against overwhelming enemy forces. The formation snapped to attention with a sound like a single massive footstep. Cade stood perfectly still, accepting recognition she had refused for 7 years. Not because she wanted it now, not because she thought she deserved it, but because accepting it was part of stepping back into the light. Part of acknowledging that what she had done mattered, even if it had come at a terrible cost that she would carry forever. When it came time for her to speak, she kept it brief. The way Marcus would have wanted, the way soldiers who actually did the work preferred. I don't deserve this any more than Warrant Officer Marcus Kane deserved it. Her voice carried across the parade field strong and clear. He taught me that every soldier matters, from the general to the private, from the operator kicking down doors to the clerk managing supply requisitions. He taught me that courage isn't being unafraid. It's doing your job when everything's falling apart around you and you're terrified and you want nothing more than to run, but you stay because people are counting on you. She looked at her students standing in formation, at Sawyer in the front rank, standing tall and confident in ways she hadn't been 6 months ago. At the others who had gone from struggling to excelling because someone had finally believed in them and shown them how. Marcus taught me that the greatest service is passing forward what we've learned, that knowledge dies if we don't share it, that experience is wasted if we don't use it to make the next generation better than we were. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. Marcus gave his life for that principle. I'm going to spend the rest of mine honoring it. The formation erupted in applause. Not the polite ceremony applause that comes from obligation, but genuine appreciation from soldiers who understood what it meant to have someone believe in them when nobody else did. To have someone invest time and energy into making them better instead of just writing them off as failures. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed and soldiers returned to their duties, Cade found herself face to face with Major General Victor Hargrove. He looked older than he had 6 months ago, grayer, the lines around his eyes deeper. The man who had cut her hair with such casual cruelty seemed diminished somehow, like a balloon slowly deflating. Chief Ashford, congratulations on the award. Well deserved. Thank you, sir. An awkward pause hung between them, the weight of everything unsaid, everything that couldn't be unsaid. Then Hargrove cleared his throat. I wanted you to know, I've submitted my retirement paperwork, effective end of next month. Cade nodded. She had heard the rumors through the battalion grapevine, had known this was coming. I hope you find peace in it, sir. Peace, wah. He laughed, but there was no humor in it, just bitterness and regret. I'm not sure I've earned peace, Chief, but maybe I can find a way to make the rest of my life mean something more than the first part did. He extended his hand. Cade looked at it for a moment, then took it. The gesture felt significant somehow. Not forgiveness exactly. Forgiveness required forgetting, and neither of them would ever forget what had happened in that office with the scissors and the falling hair, and the humiliation that had reopened wounds she'd spent years trying to close. But it was acknowledgement, that people could carry their mistakes and still move forward. That redemption wasn't about erasing the past, but about choosing better for whatever future remained. Sir, she said quietly, still holding his hand, when you leave the Army, find a way to teach. High school, JROTC, community college. Somewhere you can build people up instead of tearing them down. You have 32 years of knowledge. Use it to create instead of control. Hargrove's eyes widened slightly, as if the idea had never occurred to him that his experience could have value beyond maintaining discipline and enforcing standards. You think I could after everything. Marcus used to say that everyone deserves a second act if they're willing to do the work. She released his hand. Do the work, sir. Prove that you learned something from all this. He nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. And for the first time since she had met him, Victor Hargrove looked like a man who might actually have a chance at becoming someone better than he had been. The training program continued to grow. By the end of the first year, Cade had trained over 100 soldiers in advanced communications and tactical thinking. The Army took notice the way the Army always noticed things that actually worked. Requests came in from other installations. Could she develop a curriculum that could be replicated? Could she train instructors who could carry the program to other bases? Could she share the methodology so that struggling soldiers across the force could benefit from what she had learned? She said yes to all of it, because saying yes was what Marcus would have done, because building something that outlived her was the only way to make his sacrifice mean something beyond just her survival, because the knowledge he had given her was too valuable to die when she did. Private First Class Bryn Sawyer became Specialist Sawyer 6 months after their first session on the firing range. Then Sergeant Sawyer, 8 months after that, promoted ahead of her peers because her performance had become exceptional. Her marksmanship scores went from barely qualifying to consistently expert. Her confidence transformed her from someone who barely belonged to someone other soldiers looked up to and asked for advice. And through it all, she watched Cade. Studied her teaching methods with the intensity of someone who recognized something valuable and wanted to absorb every lesson. Asked questions about how to reach struggling soldiers, how to know when someone just needed encouragement versus when they needed a different approach entirely. 2 years after that first afternoon on the rifle range, Sawyer approached Cade's office with the hesitant posture of someone about to ask for something significant. "Ma'am, got a minute?" Cade looked up from the training schedule she was reviewing. "Of course, Sergeant. Come in." Sawyer closed the door behind her, stood at parade rest out of habit, even though the formality wasn't really necessary in this context. "Ma'am, I want to apply for Warrant Officer Candidate School, ISR Specialty." Cade set down her pen, studied the young woman who had once struggled to hit a target at 50 meters, saw the determination in her eyes, the confidence that came from knowing her capabilities and trusting them. "You understand what you're signing up for. The schooling is brutal, 18 months of technical training and stress that'll test every limit you have. The operational tempo after graduation is relentless. Deployments, operations, and the choices you'll have to make." She paused. "They're not the kind anyone should have to make, but someone has to make them anyway. I understand, ma'am. You taught me that service means showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Sawyer met her eyes without flinching. "And you taught me that the best way to honor the people who believed in us is to believe in others the same way, to pass it forward." Cade felt something break open in her chest, not pain exactly, something more complicated. Pride mixed with hope, mixed with the bittersweet understanding that legacies didn't die with people. They multiplied through the lives they touched and the lessons they passed forward, and the students who became teachers in their own right. "Then I'll write your recommendation letter tonight," she said. "And Bryn," she used the first name deliberately, marking the moment as significant, "you're going to be better than I was. That's how this works. That's how it's supposed to work. Each generation learns from the last and goes further." The call came on a Tuesday morning in late spring, 3 years after Cade's reinstatement. She was in her office reviewing training schedules and course evaluations when her secure phone rang with the distinctive tone that meant JSOC operations. "Chief Warrant Officer Ashford." "Ma'am, this is Major Garrett, JSOC Operations Center. We have a situation developing in Afghanistan, and we need your help." Cade's hand tightened on the phone, the old instincts kicking in immediately. "What's the operational status?" "Ranger platoon conducting high-value target raid in Kandahar province. They inserted via helicopter 30 minutes ago. Their ISR controller took shrapnel during the insert. He's stable but unconscious. Cannot perform his duties." "What's the current tactical situation?" "Platoon is holding position in the target compound. They secured the HVT, but intelligence indicates multiple enemy forces converging on their location from 3 directions. We have drone coverage overhead, but no one coordinating the tactical picture. No one talking them through the extraction. They're going to be surrounded and overwhelmed in approximately 12 minutes if we can't restore ISR support." The old familiar feeling washed over her like cold water. The razor focus, the absolute clarity that came from knowing American lives were at stake, and she had the skills to help, and therefore she had the responsibility to act. "Send me the operational brief and access codes immediately. I need satellite feed, drone telemetry, and direct communications with the ground force commander." "Ma'am, we can try to route another controller from our stateside reserve, but it'll take at least 20 minutes to—" "There's no time for that, Major. I can be operational in under 2 minutes. Send me the data now." She moved to her communications suite, the equipment she had insisted on installing when the training facility was built. State-of-the-art systems that she told everyone were for realistic training scenarios, but that were actually maintained to full operational specifications, updated regularly, tested constantly, just in case. The briefing data flooded across her screens. She absorbed it all in seconds, her brain automatically processing information the way it had been trained to do years ago. Enemy disposition, friendly locations, available air assets, drone positions, weather conditions. The tactical picture assembling in her mind with the speed of long practice and the precision of someone who had done this work when it meant the difference between life and death. She pulled on her headset, adjusted the microphone, keyed the radio with hands that were completely steady despite 3 years away from operational work. And for the first time since that night in Kandahar when Marcus had died and everything had fallen apart, She spoke the call signs she thought she had left behind forever. Saber 6, this is Ghost 6 Actual. I have your position. I have eyes on your compound. Talk to me. The response came back rough with static and stress and the unmistakable sound of gunfire in the background. Ghost 6, where the hell did you come from? We were told there was no controller available. Doesn't matter where I came from. I'm here now and I'm going to get you home. Her voice fell into the old patterns automatically. Calm, steady, absolutely certain. You've got approximately 30 enemy fighters moving toward your position from 3 directions. I'm tracking them on thermal imaging. First contact estimated in under 5 minutes. You ready to move? Ready as we'll ever be, Ghost 6. What do you need from us? And just like that, Cade was back. Not in Kandahar, not in 2018, not watching Marcus bleed out while she stayed on the net and finished the mission, but in the same role, the same responsibility. The voice in the darkness guiding Americans through chaos toward safety and home. For the next 47 minutes, she coordinated the extraction with the same precision she had brought to every operation she had ever run. She directed their movement through the compound, talking them through hallways and doorways and danger areas with the calm authority of someone who could see what they couldn't. She called in drone strikes on enemy positions, danger close, trusting her calculations and their discipline. She talked helicopter pilots through a hot landing zone pickup under active fire, her voice never wavering, even when she heard rounds impacting near the aircraft. When the last Ranger was aboard the helicopter and lifting away from the compound rotors beating the air and engines screaming and the ground falling away beneath them, the ground force commander came back on the radio one final time. Ghost 6, this is Saber 6, all personnel accounted for. 0 casualties, you just saved our lives. A pause. Who are you? Cade smiled alone in her office 3,000 miles away from the action. Just another soldier doing my job, Saber. Stay safe out there. She removed the headset slowly, set it on her desk with careful precision. Her hands were shaking slightly now, adrenaline finally catching up. But also something else, the realization that she had just done the things she thought she could never do again. Had put on that headset and made those choices and carried that weight and brought everyone home safely. And it hadn't destroyed her, hadn't broken her. She had survived it, more than survived. She had done good work, had saved lives, had proven to herself that Marcus's death hadn't been the end of Ghost 6, just a transformation. The door to her office opened. Colonel Pierce stood there, 70 years old now, but still sharp as ever, still showing up every day to consult and advise and watch over the program he had helped Cade build. He had been listening from the observation room, had heard the entire operation unfold. Welcome back, Ghost 6. She looked at him, at the office around her, at the training schedules on her desk and the photographs of graduating classes on her wall and the curriculum materials waiting to be reviewed. At the life she had built from the ruins of the old one. I never really left, did I? No. You just needed to find your way back to understanding that you could be both, the teacher and the operator, the builder and the protector. You don't have to choose. That evening, she drove to a cemetery on the outskirts of Colorado Springs, the place she visited every month without fail, rain or shine, regardless of how busy she was or how much work waited on her desk, found the grave she knew by heart. The headstone that was simple and clean and said almost nothing about the man buried beneath it. Warrant Officer 2 Marcus Kane. The dates of his birth and death separated by only 31 years. The unit insignia. The rank. No mention of how he had died or what he had been doing when it happened or the mission he had given his life to complete. All of that was still classified. Might always be classified. She sat on the grass beside the headstone, pulled out the photograph she still carried everywhere. The two of them before Copper Viper, before the ambush, before the impossible choice, both smiling at some forgotten joke, young and alive and full of the confidence that comes from not yet knowing how things end. I did it, Marcus, she whispered to the silence, in the stone and the memory of the man who had believed in her when she hadn't believed in herself. I put the headset back on, coordinated a real combat operation, brought everyone home safe. She traced the outline of his face on the photograph with one finger. And I didn't fall apart, didn't freeze. I just did the job. the way you taught me. The wind moved through the cemetery carrying the scent of spring flowers and fresh-cut grass and the promise of summer coming. Somewhere in the distance, a flag snapped in the breeze. The eternal rhythm of America continuing forward, built on the sacrifices of people whose names would never be known beyond a headstone and a memory. I'm training them now, teaching them everything you taught me, passing it forward the way you always said we should. A smile broke through despite the tears. Bryn Sawyer made warrant officer. She's going to ISR school next month. She's going to be better than I was, better than both of us. That's how it works, right? That's what you always said. She placed her hand on the headstone. The granite was warm from the afternoon sun, solid, real, permanent in a way that life never was. I hope I made you proud, Marcus. I hope this is what you wanted from me. Not hiding, not running, just serving in a different way, building instead of destroying, creating instead of ending. She stood slowly, knees protesting slightly. 30 years old now. Not old, but not young anymore either. I'm going to keep doing it, keep training them, keep answering when they call, keep bringing them home. For you, for them, for everyone who trusted me with their lives. The photograph went back into her wallet. She stood there for another moment, hand on the stone, saying goodbye the way she always did. Not forever, just until next month, until the next visit. The chain of memory unbroken. 6 months later, Kate received an email that made her stop and stare at her computer screen for a full minute before she could process what she was reading. The sender, Victor Hargrove. The subject line, doing the work. She opened it hesitantly, not sure what to expect. Chief Ashford, I wanted you to know that I took your advice. I'm teaching JROTC at a high school in Montana now. Small town, good kids who need direction and discipline, but also someone who actually gives a damn about their future. It's harder than I thought it would be. Teaching, I mean, really teaching instead of just enforcing standards, learning to build them up instead of tearing them down, breaking habits I've had for 30 years. But it's also better than anything I did in my entire military career. The students call me Colonel Hargrove. They don't know my history, don't know about Fort Carson or the mistakes I made there. They just see someone who shows up every day and tries to make them better than they were yesterday. I attached a photo of my first class graduation. 23 teenagers in dress uniform. Not one of them gave up even when the training got hard. Not one of them quit. They made it because I refused to let them fail. And that felt like something Marcus Kane would approve of. I know I can never undo what I did to you, but maybe I can make sure I never do it to anyone else. Maybe that's enough. Thank you for showing me there was another way. Victor Hargrove. Edwin opened the attachment. A photo of Hargrove in civilian clothes standing with a group of teenagers in JROTC uniforms. They were smiling. He was smiling. It looked genuine. She saved the email in a folder labeled Second Chances and wrote back a single line, keep doing the work. It matters. The program continued to expand. 2 years became 3, became 4. Cade trained hundreds of soldiers, developed curriculum that spread to other installations, wrote manuals that became standard references, built something that would outlive her. And approximately once every 3 months, her secure phone would ring with that distinctive JSOC tone. A mission going wrong somewhere. Americans in trouble. No ISR controller available, or the available controller overwhelmed, or the situation so complex it needed someone with her specific experience. And every time she would put on her headset and become Ghost 6 again, would coordinate the operation from her office in Colorado while soldiers fought and died and survived thousands of miles away, would bring them home. Every single time. 0 friendly casualties across 4 years of emergency operations. The students noticed when she disappeared into her communication suite and emerged hours later looking exhausted but satisfied. Noticed the classified briefings that arrived. Noticed the way senior officers treated her with a respect that went beyond rank. They didn't know the details, didn't need to know. They just understood that their instructor was someone special, someone who had done things they couldn't imagine, someone who was still doing them while also teaching them how to be better than she had been. Private First Class Bryn Sawyer, now Warrant Officer 1. Bryn Sawyer graduated from ISR school with honors, deployed to Afghanistan for her first operational assignment. And 3 months into that deployment, during a complex raid that went sideways, when multiple systems failed simultaneously, she found herself coordinating a desperate extraction while taking indirect fire at her position. Terrified, overwhelmed, certain she was about to fail and get people killed. And then over the radio, cutting through the chaos, came a voice she knew. Viper 6, this is Ghost 6. I have your position. I'm watching your back. Talk to me. Cade, 3,000 miles away in Colorado, monitoring the operation, ready to step in if her student needed help. Ghost 6, I've got this. Sawyer's voice steadied. But thank you for being there. Always Viper. Now show me what I taught you. And Sawyer did. Coordinated the extraction, called the strikes, brought everyone home, did it herself because she had been trained by someone who believed in her enough to let her try and fail and learn and grow. When the operation was over and the radios finally went quiet, Cade sat in her office and smiled. Not because her student had needed her help, but because her student had been strong enough not to need it, had been ready, had been better than Cade had been at the same point in her career. The chain unbroken, the legacy multiplying, the work continuing. 2 years later, on a morning that started like any other morning, Cade's secure phone rang again. She picked it up, expecting another emergency, another operation, another chance to be Ghost 6 and bring Americans home. Instead, it was Colonel Pierce. Cade, turn on the news, CNN, now. She grabbed the remote, turned on the television mounted on her office wall. The screen filled with breaking news from Afghanistan, a major operation, Taliban leadership compound, Joint Task Force insertion. And there, in the lower third of the screen, scrolling past in text, operation coordinated by ISR Warrant Officer Bryn Sawyer, former student of the Ghost 6 training program. Cade watched her student work, watched the tactical picture unfold with the precision of someone who had been taught well and had practiced harder. Watched as every lesson she had ever passed forward was being applied in real time by someone who had learned from her mistakes and her successes and her hard-won wisdom. The operation succeeded. Clean, professional, textbook. When it was over, when the news moved on to other stories and the adrenaline faded and the world continued turning, Cade sat quietly in her office and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Complete peace. Not because the guilt was gone. It would never be gone. Marcus would always be with her, a weight she carried and a memory she honored. But because she had finally done what he had asked her to do, had finished the mission he had given his life for, pass it forward, make it matter, turn his sacrifice into something that lived on and grew and multiplied through generations of soldiers who would never know his name but who would benefit from his lessons. She pulled out the photograph one more time, Marcus smiling, young, alive, full of wisdom he would never get to share himself. Still bringing them home, Marcus, she whispered, every single one, just like you taught me. And now they're teaching others. The chain goes on, your legacy goes on, forever. Outside her window, the sun was setting over Fort Carson, the same mountain she had seen every day for 4 years, the same flag snapping in the wind, the same base that had once been a place to hide and had become a place to build and was now simply home. Down the hall, she could hear Warrant Officer Sawyer's voice over video conference, fresh back from deployment, already teaching a new class of students, using the same breathing techniques, the same mental discipline, the same understanding that the weapon was just a tool and the real weapon was the mind that controlled it. Marcus's voice, Cade's voice, Sawyer's voice, an unbroken chain of teachers and students and warriors and professionals passing forward knowledge, bought with blood and sacrifice, and the kind of courage that never made headlines. Cade stood, straightened her uniform out of habit, checked her watch. Time for the evening briefing with her instructors. Time to review the day's training and plan tomorrow's lessons and make sure every single soldier in her program was progressing toward excellence. Time to do the work, because that's what service meant. Not glory, not recognition, not medals or ceremonies or headlines, just showing up every day and doing the work and passing forward what you had learned so that the next generation could be better than you were. Ghost 6, instructor, guardian, builder, teacher, all of it, together, forever. The phone on her desk rang. Not the secure line this time, just the regular battalion phone. She picked it up. Chief Ashford? Ma'am, this is the training office. We've got 3 more soldiers requesting admission to your program. All of them struggling with qualification scores. All of them about to be recommended for reclassification. Cade smiled, pulled out a notepad, started taking names. Send me their files. I'll reach out to them this afternoon. We'll get them scheduled for an assessment. Because there were always more soldiers who needed help. Always more people who had been told they weren't good enough. Always more students who just needed someone to believe in them and show them what they were capable of. And Ghost 6 would always answer that call. In the distance, evening formation was beginning, the sound of NCOs calling cadence, boots hitting pavement in synchronized rhythm, the eternal heartbeat of a military base preparing for nightfall. Cade Ashford, Chief Warrant Officer, 3 former operator, current instructor, walked down the hallway toward her next class, carrying Marcus's legacy, building something that would outlast them both, doing the work. Because that's what warriors did when the shooting stopped. They taught the next generation how to fight and how to come home, always home.